Hello everyone, and welcome to today's new practitioner panel webinar. My name is Amanda, and I'm the marketing manager here at AOTA, and I'm going to explain a little bit about how these webinars will work. Each webinar presentation will conclude with a Q&A session. You may begin typing your questions in for our presenters at any time during the webinar, but please note that we will only be addressing these questions at the end of the presentation, and we will do our best to address as many questions as time allows. CE credit will be available for all member appreciation webinars beginning November 13th, so please visit the member appreciation webpage on aota.org at that time for instructions on how to earn your free CE. And with that, let me introduce today's presenters, Elizabeth Hart, Tiffany Green, and Gabrielle Heckman. Ladies.
Hi everyone, we are really excited to be presenting with you all today. We'll kind of go ahead and each introduce ourselves and then we'll get right to it. So my name is Gabby Heckman. I am a new grad, very new. I graduated from the University of Missouri this past May, and our clinicals kind of run a little bit late. So I finished up my clinicals at the end of June, and then July took boards, and then August started the job. So kind of all fresh. I've been working with a company that I'm with now called Kids First Therapy for 3 months. So I do outpatient in the clinic. I go into the schools 2 days a week. We have a contract there. And then I also do First Steps, which is Missouri's early intervention, so birth to 3. My email's here, so you guys can feel free to contact me at any time, and we'll have them again at the end. So I'll let Tiffany introduce herself now.
Hi, my name is Tiffany Green. I am a certified occupational therapy assistant. I graduated in 2015 from Houston Community College. I actually started off doing working PRN and doing contract work in skilled nursing facilities and pediatric and geriatric home health. Now, I was working PRN for the company you see there, the hospital, Clear Lake Regional Medical Center. I worked PRN for them for 1.5 years, and I just started full-time in October. So this is my first full-time position. I kind of like bouncing around and learning everything that I could before this, but I was ready to park my car, basically. And my email is there and available anytime.
Hi everyone, Hi everyone, I'm Elizabeth Hart. I graduated from UNC Chapel Hill in 2014 and passed my boards in the fall of that year. I originally started working as a contractor in a mental health setting, and I had started a half-time position at Carrollwood's Retirement Community, which is a continuing care retirement community here in Chapel Hill. And that half-time position eventually became my current full-time job. I was also a participant in AOTA's Emerging Leaders Development Program in 2014, so I can answer questions about that if you have questions about it at the end of our chat. All right, let's get started. So our learning objectives today, what we're going to discuss with you all is success at fieldwork, the NBCOT tests and preps and things that you guys can do to take that exam, landing your first job from the CODA perspective and also an OT perspective, and then we're going to talk about mentorship. So I'll begin first with talking about success at fieldwork. So I remember thinking about fieldwork as, oh my goodness, I'm going to be expected to know everything and I need to go out here and be ready. So I was really nervous, but I really want to stress before I kind of go into my slide is that's a learning experience for you. But so yes, you should be prepared. Your school has prepared you, but you need to ask questions, and this is your time to really soak everything in. So don't be too worried. I would say my first bullet kind of talks about being prepared and ready to learn every day. So we all have taken classes and been in the classroom environment, but whenever you really start fieldwork, I remember thinking, wow, oh my goodness, I'm really exhausted because your brain is constantly on. You're constantly learning and taking everything. Mute off. My first advice would be on time, actually be there a little bit early. I always, and our fieldwork educator always communicated with us that, hey, you should maybe travel the route the day of. For example, my first fieldwork level 2, I had to go park somewhere and then get on a bus, so just knowing where to be and where to park and things like that. bring the necessary paperwork or assignments that need to be completed. So I know at my school, and I'm sure everyone else will have kind of a list of assignments that need to be completed. For my sites, I tried to kind of print those out, and during my first meeting with my fieldwork supervisor, we kind of discussed about what was to come, because that's kind of our responsibility to do that and carry that information and kind of to know when those things need to be completed and guidelines and things like that. I also kind of made a binder, which was helpful for her and I to kind of keep everything on track and going. Communication is key. Ask lots of questions. They don't expect you to know everything, and that's kind of why you're there, and that's kind of what I started out my slide with. I thought the first day I'd be thrown in there right away. The first week or so, you're kind of, and it really depends on your site, and the first week is just, you know, learning and taking it all in, learning the ropes, and then after that, they're slowly kind of starting to wean you in. They're not going to expect you to take over the full caseload that first day. Be open to constructive feedback. That's, I think, one of the hardest things. We want to think that we are, you know, right and may know what always is what is best to do, but, you know, that's why we're there. We're still students and we're learning. So be open to that, and going off of that, know your strengths and your areas to grow. For example, documentation. I was like, oh my goodness, this whole documentation system is very overwhelming. You know, we learned how to write a SOAP note and do goals, but every documentation at every site is very different. And then my last bullet would be to really immerse yourself into the setting. So take those extra opportunities, you know, to come in a little later or come in earlier or stay later. For example, I did a TBI support group a couple times while I was at my first fieldwork site, and I really, I think that spoke a lot of my character, you know, staying late and doing this opportunity to do something like this, and I learned a lot from the families in that opportunity. So ask about those things because they're usually there. And then see if you have time to shadow maybe other departments. So I took a couple days. So I was in the rehab setting for my first field work. And then so they're like, hey, do you want to go to acute? And do you want to see our burn unit? And do you want to see everything else? And I was like, yes, because that's your time to kind of learn those things. So that is all I have for you about fieldwork. And I'll be ready to answer any questions about that at the end.
Okay, this is Tiffany. I'm going to speak to you about NBCOT test and prep. Well, the first thing you need to do is learn to breathe and find your calming place. It is a little nerve-wracking for you, you know, to think about, okay, this is going to be that bridge to my career, but you need to learn to focus and calm yourself. The first thing that we found kind of helpful for us is organizing ourselves. So the first thing you want to do is kind of look at go to the NBCOT site. There's a self-assessment there. Also on the AOTA NBCOT prep website, there are some sample tests too. So that kind of gives you an idea of where you're at, your strengths, your weaknesses, and it will kind of help you plan about how long you may need to study. You also want to register for your test date and your location as soon as you can. They fill up pretty fast, and have two choices ready. Just in case your first choice is not available, you can pick another location. You definitely need to be real flexible with that. Also, creating a study schedule and have a calendar available will help you kind of organize your thoughts. And it also helps in calming you and increasing your confidence when approaching the exam. I took about 6 weeks of study time. Some people took a little bit longer, but you'll know pretty much after you take those first sample tests how prepared you think you are. Also, I think something that's very important is creating an accountability team. It's going to be made up of your classmates, your professors, family, friends, also other OT students and COTA students through Facebook groups. They were so helpful. It provided a lot of support for me with AOTA's NBCOT Exam Prep Info Center Facebook page, also the NBCOT OTR and COTA certification page. There was a wealth of information there. And also When people would learn that they had passed their exams, they would come on there and give you, advice on how they approached it, things that may have happened during the test, things they were prepared for or may not have been prepared for. That kind of information is just invaluable to you, and you will definitely find that helpful. One of the things I keep saying, stay calm, is balance. You definitely need balance when you're preparing for your test. You want to make sure that you decide what's kind of best for you. Group study, I think, is very helpful, especially for challenging material. But I found that limiting the number of days per week that I participated in group study helped me. Some people, need a lot more group input, but I think that individual study time, because you're going to take that test on your own, that individual study time is important. You need to create a study space for yourself that's free of clutter. Eliminate any distractions when you're in your study space. A big distraction is cell phones, so we want to put away those cell phones if we can. You can actually schedule cell phone time or schedule break time within your day. I studied 4 to 6 hours per day, and I did take one day off a week to kind of goof off and do nothing and not think about the exam. I think that's very important for you. I know some people, you may have family obligations. Just make sure that you use your whole team, what we talked about, your family, your friends, to help you so that you do have that free time to study. Also, you want to just pace yourself. You want to take your time, especially if you've scheduled 6 weeks or 8 weeks to prepare. You want to space everything out so you're not cramming different sections in the last 2 days or the last 3 days. You want to spread everything out over time so you feel better prepared. And maybe for me, the day before the test, I did not study at all. I goofed off the day before just to give my mind a reset. I think that's very helpful. The morning of, I went to breakfast. So you want to make sure you arrive to the test location early. Like I said, I had breakfast near the location so that I did not feel as rushed. I kind of eased into my test day. And that's something that I think would be very helpful to you. On the next page, I have a sample group study schedule. Just to re-emphasize, I did not study with my group multiple days a week. We met 1 day per week, and we limited that to an hour and a half. We spent the week preparing on our own on an individual basis, and then we would meet up as a group and just we'd address all of the challenging questions that we came across and then we'd also share tips on how we prepared that week to address all the materials. And this last slide on test and prep, these are just some of the tools. The AOTA exam prep, that's an online tool that you can use. You become a subscriber for 1 year. There's a COTA subscription and an OTR subscription. They contain about 1,000 questions to help you prepare. The exams themselves they provide feedback so that they'll tell you, for instance, these were your strengths during this exam and these were your weaknesses, so that you'll know what questions you may need to go back and refresh. The NBCOT online test prep, that's another great tool. They actually have packages now, so you can get flashcards. There are like 500 terms in them, practice test, study guide. There's also a matching game. Well, it's a set of 20 games that you can use to help you prepare. And some of the other things are things that you would do usually with your school. The Therapy Ed test prep course, a lot of times schools offer those. The Therapy Ed review and study guide, which is provided as part of the prep course. And for COTAs, I know we all know about the Purple Book. Some people find it helpful. It's just another tool. And also all of your material from your class. those are, I mean, that's something that you've been exposed to very often. Make sure you keep it and use it as a resource when you're preparing for your exam. And just going to the exam knowing that you've spent the last 2 years preparing for this, and you know a lot more than you think. So you've retained a lot of information, and you are ready. Okay, and our next topic is landing your first job. With CODAs, it's a little different for us because we have to have supervision from an OTR. So to me, in deciding what practice setting you want to go to for your first job, you need to determine how much supervision you really need or desire. Do you need to have an OTR physically near you, like in a hospital setting or a skilled nursing facility setting or a school setting, or are you okay with just having an OTR readily available to you? So in a home health setting, the OTR is not always going to be there. And sometimes you can't get an answer immediately, but maybe, a few minutes into your session, you may be able to, have that contact. So you need to decide how much direct supervision you need on a daily basis when determining where you want to start your practice. Also, something that is very helpful is knowing the productivity requirements. I think that's in general for OTRs and CODAs. Knowing the productivity requirements, what's your waiver period? Are you expected to have 90-95% productivity after a week on the job? Or is it 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? That's very important. Also, the OTR and CODA requirements for that as well. Is it different? I'm in a hospital setting now. OTRs actually have a different set of productivity requirements from CODAs because OTRs perform evaluations and reevaluations, and that's, those are different units attached to that. And so it's very important to understand, am I expected to meet the same productivity as an OTR when I don't have the option of having an eval with greater units available? And also, because OT world is very small, you can kind of ask around about the turnover at certain facilities. That's very important. Use your network that you've created to just find out the realities of the turnover at each facility. And I'll be happy to answer any questions at the end on this.
All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about finding your first job from my perspective as an OT, and I think some of these points apply to both OTs and OTAs. When you're looking for a job, I think all of us have in our head what our dream OT job would be, but I think it's important to acknowledge that your first job may not necessarily be your dream job. So it's really important for you to prioritize what it is you are looking for in that first job. Are you looking for mentorship from a more experienced OT? Are you looking for a lot of training and support for your first job? Are you looking to work as part of an interdisciplinary team? Are you looking to pick up a specific skill set or to work with a certain type of population or in a certain setting? And really let those priorities dictate your job search. I came to OT as a fourth career, actually, a little bit later in my life, and I think one thing that's been helpful to me both in my pre-OT work life and my current job as an OT is I've always started my job searches by identifying the places I want to work first. Don't just rely on job listings, because in my experience, the best jobs I've had, I think the best jobs out there, often aren't listed at all. They're filled through networking. So the best way to find those jobs is to really think about where are the places that I would love to work, and then find a way in. So I did this as a student. The facility I'm in now is actually my OT dream job. I had my eye on this facility because I thought their philosophy and approach to care was really, it resonated with me as an OT. And I knew that they didn't have a lot of OTs, and I knew that on the rare occasions when they posted jobs, they got snatched up pretty quickly. So I very deliberately sought out a fieldwork placement there for my final fieldwork, because I knew if I could show what I could do as a fieldwork student, that would increase my likelihood of getting a job there later. So I did my final level 2 fieldwork there. Really, I did the best I could in that position and made a good friend and ally in my fieldwork supervisor. And at the end of my fieldwork, I wrote a letter to the director of the department saying, you know, here's why I think you need more OT than you have right now. And I kind of made a case, and it was several months went by, but I got periodic updates from my fieldwork supervisor saying, you know, they're thinking about this, we're pushing, you know, I'm pushing for more OT. She kept me apprised of what was happening, that there was a possibility that they would be creating a new position. And the second they posted that position, she let me know about it, and I submitted my resume the same day. And it originally started as they made me a half-time offer, and while I would have rather have started, you know, accepted a full-time position, I took the half-time position because I thought there was potential to turn it into a full-time position. And after a year, that's exactly what I did. So that was, you know, I found the place I wanted to be, and I fought my way in. And I think if you do that, that's the best path to landing your dream job. But even if you can't land your dream job for your first job, you can plant seeds in the places that you do want to work. You can make connections with people who work in those settings, and that way you learn about those opportunities before anyone else does. And if you approach your job search this way, it's important to do your research, not just researching online, but researching with other practitioners. That was really the best source of information for me about different employers in the area. My fieldwork coordinator was also incredibly helpful in this respect. If I didn't know someone who worked in a particular setting, I asked my fieldwork coordinator, do you know anyone who's worked there before or anyone who's working there now, and can you put me in touch? And that was incredibly helpful. So do as much research about the employer as you can before you apply. And when you know more about the employer, you can tailor your resume and your cover letter when you apply, which certainly makes you stand out from the crowd. I have a million versions of my resume, and each version of my resume highlights different qualities that I think are different experiences that I think are going to be important to different employers. So when I was looking for mental health jobs, I highlighted my mental health advocacy and mental health work that I did in school, and I tailored it a little bit differently when I was applying for geriatric positions. So don't just rely on one version of your resume. And if you're going to write a cover letter, and I strongly recommend that you do, make sure it's not just a generic cover letter. Make sure you're really tailoring it to each place you're applying, and explain what it is about that place of employment appeals to you, and what you think that you can, what value you think you can bring to their organization. When you get an interview, it's important to think of the interview as a conversation, not just an interrogation. I know that in the past, a common mistake that I've made certainly is focusing so much on making a good impression that I forget to ask questions myself and to think about, is this a place that I really want to work? Because the employer is asking you questions to figure out if you're a good fit for their organization, but you need to be asking them questions to figure out if they're a good fit for you. So I think you should be asking just as many questions of the potential employer as they're asking of you. And since you've done your research before you even walked in the door, you should have some pretty smart questions to ask them. And you can always ask other more experienced OTs, what do you think is an important question to ask in that first interview? What's funny about this is that if you take your mind off making an impression and focus more on getting a feel for the employer and figuring them out, is you tend to make a really good impression when you ask smart, well-researched questions. I've gotten feedback from interviews I've done before that, you know, we haven't had a job applicant who's asked us so many great questions. Like, it really stands out to people when you ask them good questions about their work. And don't overlook red flags. when you're interviewing, if you get a bad vibe about the situation, like, listen to that. If you're getting conflicting information about a particular employer, or if you feel like you haven't seen or learned enough to really know if that's a good fit for you, you can always ask to shadow one of the OTs or OTAs there for a day to see if it's a good fit. The worst the employer can say is no, but doing that can give you a better idea of whether or not it's a good fit for you. I did this before as a brand new graduate. I was still looking for a job. I had been unemployed for a couple of months and was very eager to pull in my first paycheck. And I interviewed at a place. I heard some very mixed reviews from other OTs about this particular employer, and I got a kind of a bad vibe from it during the interview process. And I shadowed, and it didn't feel right to me. There were a lot of red flags. And so they ended up making me a job offer, and it was very, very difficult for me to turn it down because I had no other offers on the table at that point. But all signs pointed to this not being the right fit for me. So I turned it down, and 2 weeks later, I got notification that they were creating this new position at the place I really wanted to work. So really trust your gut. If you are in a position where you have to take a job that you know is not going to be a great fit, then what you need to do is set the groundwork to find the job that you do want to have. So really targeting, looking for OTs working in settings where you want to be, networking with those people and looking for those opportunities, even if you're in a job that's not what you really want. When you do get a job offer, please don't accept any job offer without negotiating. Negotiating salary is not my favorite thing. It's not a lot of fun for most people, but it's so important because otherwise you may be leaving money on the table. I've negotiated my salary at every job I've been at, and I hate it. But I did a calculation recently of how much money that negotiating process got me over time, and it is many tens of thousands of dollars because your pay increases are based upon that starting salary. So if you can even increase that by 5 or 10% from the get-go, that's going to pay dividends the longer you're in that job. When you're making a counteroffer, I recommend you do your salary research first. So there are several websites online you can research salaries. I've found it very valuable to ask practitioners. A lot of practitioners are pretty forthcoming about sharing that information. I've also relied on my fieldwork coordinator and some of my professors to advise me through some of those negotiations. And if you're looking, at least in North Carolina, if you're looking at a state employer, some of those salaries are actually public information. They're in the public domain. So it's good to make an educated counteroffer. Some facilities have a very defined salary structure, so there may not be room to negotiate the salary, and they will tell you that. They're not going to rescind the job offer if you make a counteroffer. But if they say that there's no room to negotiate the salary, you can try negotiating for other things. You can negotiate for time off to do continuing education. You can negotiate for money to do continuing education, or professional association membership, or your schedule. So just keep that in mind. And when they make you that initial offer, always take time to think about it and consider it, and identify areas where you may be able to negotiate for a better deal. Mentorship is so important as a new graduate. It can be formal or informal, and you can have more than one mentoring relationship at any given time. I've had a series of both formal and informal mentorship. the good thing about formal mentorships is that you can actually earn CEU credits for both being a mentor and being a mentee. And you'll have to look at your state practice act to understand exactly how you can get credit for those, or consult your state board. So formal relationships can be really good, where you sit down, you outline goals for the mentoring relationship in the beginning, and you have regular meetings to stay on track. Those can be really helpful. They can also be really daunting for a lot of people, for both mentees and mentors. I've had people approach me for formal mentorship opportunities, and sometimes that's more challenging. It might be easier for me just to meet you for coffee and to chat with you for a couple of hours than to commit to an ongoing relationship. So you might keep that in mind when you're thinking about whether to pursue formal or informal opportunities. An informal mentoring relationship can be something as simple as just meeting an OT who's doing work you find interesting, meeting them on a regular or semi-regular basis, over coffee, over lunch at different OT events, and just picking their brain. That can be that I have those relationships with a lot of OTs, and those conversations have been incredibly helpful to me in my practice. It's important, whether you think of them as mentoring relationships or not, it's really important that you surround yourself with a community of practitioners who really inspire you. They can be classmates, they can be people who are in similar practice settings, or they can just be your OT idols. If you find opportunities to spend time around these people, whether they're at, I'm lucky here in the Triangle area of North Carolina, we have a group of OTs who meet every quarter to talk about topics specific to gerontology. So that's a great opportunity for me to connect with this incredible community of geriatric practitioners. But I also have classmates who I'm still in contact with, and we meet regularly just to talk about the challenges we're facing as recent graduates in our particular practice settings. I think it's really important that you connect with the people who really inspire you to be a better OT. I find that day-to-day practice sometimes can grind you down. The daily challenges can get really tough, and sometimes I need to meet with my OT idols to reignite that spark, to remind me why it is I do what I do and what I love about the profession, and that allows me to come back to my daily practice re-energized. I also recommend that everyone assemble what I call your own personal board of directors. These are the people that you can turn to when you've lost the plot, when you're at a crossroads, you don't know which way to turn, if you have a really challenging case that you can't find your way through. And these people, my personal board of directors consist of a lot of people. They consist of former classmates of mine, they consist of former professors of mine, a former fieldwork supervisor of mine. Just keeping in touch with those people is really important in turning to them. I know who to turn to if I'm having a really challenging case at work and I need a perspective of an outstanding geriatric practitioner. I know who I'm going to go to. If I have a couple of leadership opportunities that have been presented to me and I don't know whether or not I can take them on, if I can juggle them, I know who to turn to ask about that. So just think about who that community is for you and stay connected to those people. Mentoring is also a two-way street. I firmly believe that no matter where you are in your career, you are in a position to mentor somebody. So if you're a first-year OT student, you can mentor aspiring OT students. You can mentor folks who are applying to OT school right now. If you're a second-year OT student, you can mentor first-year OT students and prospective OT students. And if you're a new practitioner, you can mentor students and prospective OT students. So just look for those opportunities to, no matter where you are in your career, look behind you and think, who can you help? Who's coming behind you that could use your perspective? And don't shy away from those opportunities. Don't be afraid, even as a new practitioner, to take on shadowers. I find was very daunting to me as a new practitioner to have prospective OT students come to see me, but I've found it really valuable because it forces me to articulate my clinical reasoning, and I think it keeps me accountable. It makes me want to demonstrate best practice because I'm shaping someone else's point of view about what occupational therapy looks like. So I found it very helpful in my practice, and I would recommend that all new practitioners do that just to keep themselves accountable. And also take on fieldwork students as soon as you can. I've learned so much about my own practice from working with, from supervising fieldwork students. So don't wait until you feel ready to take on shadowers or fieldwork students, because you're never going to feel ready, but you're going to learn a lot in the process. So now we each kind of shared our top tips for new graduates. My very top tip is to maintain your membership in both AOTA and your state association. Your membership in those organizations, conferences, are incredibly valuable networking opportunities and continuing education opportunities. But it's also important to recognize that both AOTA and your state association do really important work to ensure that you have a job. The advocacy work that they do depends entirely on membership dues, and really shapes both what your practice looks like and where you can practice. So it's the simplest thing that you can do to support that work. If you don't want to keep apprised of all the changing regulations and laws that affect your practice, that's fine. But your membership helps to ensure that someone is at the table representing you at those really important discussions. My second tip is that there is always going to be something to learn. You know, I know a lot more. I feel like my skill set is so much bigger now than it was when I started 2 years ago, but I still have so much more to learn. Never be afraid to ask for help or to say that you don't know something, but you'll find out. In my experience, clients don't expect you to be experts, but they do expect you to listen to them and to be honest with them. And no one has ever faulted me for saying, you know, I don't know, but let me find out. Let me do some research on that. Because there's so much to learn, you really need to prioritize your learning needs and then make a plan to help build your skill set. So it took a while, it took a few months of me practicing to realize what I didn't know, what I needed to, you know, the skill sets I really needed to develop, and that allowed me to set some short-term goals. You know, first I want to get more training in working with individuals with dementia, and then I want to get more experience with low vision, and then make a plan accordingly. The great thing about our profession is that there's always something to learn. There's always a new skill set that you can build. Tiffany, do you want to talk about your tips?
Okay. And my tip was begin taking your continuing education courses early to increase your skill set, your competency. Also, you'll need that to maintain your license. You want to make sure that your courses are recognized by, it should have said, I'm sorry, I had NBCOT on the brain, AOTA and your state licensing board. On AOTA's website, aota.org, there's a section called Education and Careers. If you go to that section of the website, there's a link called Continuing Education. And on there, you can actually search the database for all the approved providers. The courses that have been approved and the approved providers, it's right there. I actually know someone that kind of crammed in their courses at midnight, basically, the day they were due to renew the license, and the courses were not approved, and you do not want to go through that process. So spread those out over time. Start them as early as you can. Your job may offer free CEUs. Your state association will definitely offer those. So you want to take advantage of those as early in your career as you can. Gabby?
Yes, and so my last couple tips, number 4, so keeping in touch with your program and classmates. So I don't know how many times since I've started my job I've called up kind of my friend group within the class, or just message them on Facebook, or especially emailed professors to ask about, old PowerPoints, because I have a client that's very similar to this, or just to someone to bounce ideas off of. Because like I said, and like Emily kind of touched on in number 2, we're always still learning, and I sometimes feel like I have a lot more questions now that I'm even out in the field to, learn more and be like, okay, I'm seeing this. So I just need people to sometimes bounce off my ideas and things like that. So definitely keeping in touch is really important, and something that I have found very beneficial in these first 3 months out in the field. And then my other one was seek out mentorship within your workplace or your state or national association. So I was also an emerging leader, and that was a great experience. I just ended that this past year, and that is how that opportunity, that was, I sought out a mentorship within our program, and then that mentorship led to something at the state level and then the national level. So being open, asking those questions, and I kind of going back to Emily's slide on mentorship, kind of second all that, because that's really important, and that's how we really find out about other opportunities and how to grow as an individual in our field. All right, now we are on to the questions and answers. So you guys have been typing in questions over in the Q&A text box, and we will kind of start going through those right now and answer as many as we can before our time is up. So one of the first ones, and Emily and I, or Elizabeth and I can both touch on this a little bit. So what is the Emerging Leaders Program, and kind of what does that look like? So it's a year-long mentorship through AOTA. My experience was I served with the Volunteer Leadership Development Committee. It is an application process to be an emerging leader. So I think that usually happens, I want to say it was in the spring. I kind of applied for that, and then I found out that summer, and then you actually get to go up to AOTA for 2 days and meet with the other emerging leaders that are selected. And then you are partnered with a mentor, someone within AOTA, typically on a committee, maybe vice president, other positions within AOTA, and you work alongside of them, and you have meetings with them. And for mine, the Volunteer Leadership Development Committee, I kind of helped with awards and the election process. So that was kind of my experience, and it has kind of one of the reasons why I'm here today, kind of opened the AOTA door for me, especially as a new grad. I know it can be kind of really overwhelming on how to really get started with that. So I'll let Elizabeth share hers.
Yeah, it's important to know that the Emerging Leaders Development Program is a leadership program specifically aimed at new practitioners, so practitioners in their first 5 years of practice, and recent graduates who are interested in leadership specifically within AOTA. So it's not a good program if you're looking for clinical mentorship or if you're looking for leadership opportunities at the state level. But AOTA, if you're looking to build your leadership skills, and I think it's important, it's so important to the future of the profession that every member really harness their leadership skills. AOTA has a great program, online program for all practitioners and students called A Mindful Path to Leadership. A lot of the training, a lot of that was taken from the Emerging Leaders Development Program and the Middle Managers Program, but it can be applied to wherever you want to lead. So I would seriously encourage you to look into that if you're interested in building your own leadership capacity.
All right, our next question is, what are your thoughts regarding going into hands after graduating versus going into a job that could provide more opportunity to see a variety of conditions? This kind of has a couple parts, so I'll answer that first part. So as being a new grad kind of out in the field, I've been working in pediatrics for 3 months. I knew peds was something that I was super passionate about and what I wanted to do. I personally have kind of an aquatic interest in things like that, and so hands in any specialized area usually requires so many hours out in the field. So maybe if you're really interested in doing hands, maybe seeking out like an outpatient job setting first, so you can kind of see all kinds of work, or a work hardening program possibly, to kind of build up those hours and make sure that's something that you're really passionate about and interested in doing, would be my suggestion. And girls, Tiffany and Elizabeth, please feel free to chime in as well. But the other part was, do you think it's a good idea to get more well-rounded experience after graduating instead of going specialize. So that's kind of what I answered. But I think it's really up to you and how passionate you are. I think it's good to know what all is out there. I think in fieldwork you kind of get a taste for that, but there are so many areas, and that's the beauty of OT, is there's so many opportunities to kind of pursue.
All right.
And then, oh, go ahead.
Are we going to go in order? There are so many. You all have so many questions. I'm afraid we're going to run out of time if we go in order.
Why don't I just answered one? So why don't you take one?
Okay. I'm going to answer. So a few people have asked about. I mentioned watching out for red flags when you're in an interview, and some people wanted me to elaborate on that. So red flags. So specific examples in the job that I ended up turning down. I heard that there was a lot of turnover at the facility, that there had been a job opening for a long time, and there had been a lot of OTs who started and left pretty quickly. I had heard from some students who'd done field work there that the leadership situation, that the supervisor for that department had a challenging relationship with some of the OTs, and that the OTs themselves had challenging relationships with each other. And I noticed when I met with the department that there was it wasn't a very convivial atmosphere, that I could tell that the relationships there were strained. So those are all really big red flags to me. So yeah, if you can tell when you ask someone about a particular employer, it's pretty evident, in their response how they feel about that employer. So I think it's really important to ask around and pay attention to your own impressions. How do the people get along with each other? If you ask them questions about, what do you love most about your job? What are the biggest challenges? Really pay attention to their answers and the way that they respond to you.
Okay, and I'm going to kind of combine a few of these regarding NBCOT, the study schedule, and when did you start studying, and when did you start looking for a job around NBCOT. So I'll kind of combine those. With the NBCOT exam, I actually did not start studying until 1 week after graduation. My director of my program actually wanted us to wait 2 weeks after graduation to start studying for NBCOT. But we waited some of us waited about a week after graduation and started our studying. It just worked better for us because, you ended field work. It was just kind of a stressful period, and you needed to wind down after 2 years of continuous school. But I do have some classmates that started after their second field work. They started doing short reviews. My group did consist of classmates. I didn't start an extra Facebook group for that. We did study as classmates. We referred to the graduating class before ours. We did use them as a resource as well. And as far as the job and NBCOT is concerned, some of us did not wait. I did, but some did not wait to start looking for a job. They actually had jobs after, right away after graduating. The companies did allow some of them to start working under a temporary license and gave them study time, and they hired on permanently after they passed their exam. So some companies will work with you and allow you to start working temporarily and give you some study time before you actually pass your exam.
All right, this is Gabby, and I will go ahead and take one, and then we'll just kind of keep cycling through as much as we can. Did you perform your field work in a city that was not home to you? If so, how was this experience? Would you recommend this? I think this is kind of a personal, if you're kind of looking for an adventure and wanting to explore a new city, I think this is fieldwork is a great opportunity. I would talk with your fieldwork educator. Sometimes I know I had a classmate and a good friend that the hospital that she was working at down in Texas provided housing for her. That's not all the time, but really communicate with your fieldwork educator for that. So that makes it a little less overwhelming. She already kind of had a place in the hospital. They had housing there, so it was kind of a good way to meet new people. I did go somewhere where I was not from for fieldwork, and I really enjoyed it. I'm from a smaller town, and I wanted to challenge myself and kind of go to a bigger city and see what all I could learn at a big children's hospital, and then also Kansas University Rehab Center. So I really liked that. I thought it provided, every client was very different, and I got to learn a lot, and a lot of research was kind of done. So that was really neat for me, but I had a lot of friends in the area. So.
Okay, this is Elizabeth. I got several questions about negotiating salary. So how to find out what's an average salary, how to find out what an average salary is, and the nitty-gritty of how to negotiate. So you can find out, in terms of there being an average salary, it really depends on practice setting. AOTA does an annual salary survey. They release an annual salary survey that's very helpful, and that's broken out by practice setting and region. So I would suggest starting there. There's some websites online like salary.com. I think Indeed may have a salary survey as well. Those I find a little less helpful than AOTA's salary survey. And again, you can ask practitioners in similar practice settings. You can ask your professors. You can ask your fieldwork coordinator. You know, some people are more willing than others to share this information. And again, if you're applying to a state institution, some of that salary information may be public information. When you're going to negotiate a salary, so I usually only start salary negotiations once I have a job offer. There have been times when in the interview process when people have asked me what my salary expectations are, so it's good to have at least a ballpark number in your head going into the interview. But at that point, I keep it very, very vague. I don't want to necessarily tie my down to a number, especially if I haven't done my research yet. So I just say I'm looking, you know, for something in this ballpark, and I'll give like a $20,000 range. And then when they give me the job offer, I usually say, you know, can you give me a couple of days to look this over and think about it? And then I either call them back, or I have written a letter before saying I am so thrilled, you know, I'm so thrilled to have this offer. You know, I got a great impression from my interview with your organization. I think that this could be a really good place for me to grow and contribute. You know, based on my research, I think a salary of X is a little more appropriate. And then see what they come back with. And if you're not negotiating salary, say, you know, I understand you have a firm salary structure, but you know, I'm wondering if I could potentially get money for CEUs or get money to maintain my professional association memberships. And then the worst they can say is no. But usually in my experience, they'll come back and say, well, we can't quite meet you there, but we could offer you this. And it's more than their original offer.
I wanted to chime in real quick, Elizabeth, because I had that same kind of thing, and I was super really worried about it as being a new grad and not knowing exactly what to expect. So I did my research, talked to professors, kind of did a lot of pretty much everything Elizabeth said, and it ended up being very positive. I did have the comment, you know, well, you're a new grad, and this is what I was thinking, you know, and I came back with also saying, okay, this is kind of what I thought through research, and kind of asking in the area what is more appropriate. And then I also made the comment of, you know, give me 6 months and maybe we can review my work and see what I've done for you in that time. And that was a really good thing and something that she also suggested. So that's another way to also say, you know, let me show you what I can do in 6 months or whatnot, and then we can have another review and kind of see where I've growth, where there was growth or where there needs to be more growth and whatnot. I thought that was something that I didn't know as a new grad and thought that was a good tip.
Do you want to take a question, Tiffany?
Yes, I can. Let's see. Well, I kind of saw two things. One was someone was asking about CEUs, how many do you need per year? I'm in Texas, and so it's going to vary by state. I'm required to have 30 CEUs to maintain my license here, and you could, like I said, some people wait until midnight to do them. There's no you just have to have them done by the time it's time to renew your license. So each state is going to be different, so you definitely want to check with your license board. Also, I saw someone that had a question about how long they should wait to follow up after a job interview. I would reach out as soon as possible, contacting the company just to follow up and thank them again for interviewing you and checking on the status of the job posting. Gabby or Elizabeth, do you have any advice on that as well? How soon should you follow up after an interview?
I typically follow up. I follow up within a day just to say thank you for the opportunity.
Right.
I really enjoyed our conversation. XYZ, when can I expect to hear back from you? And then oftentimes they'll say, oh, we have a certain number of interviews, check back next week. They'll give you a timeline for when you can check back in. And if they don't, then I usually will check back in a week or two later and say, again, it was such a pleasure talking with you the other day. I'm wondering where you are in the search process. And people have been most employers are pretty good about getting back to you if you show that kind of follow-up.
Right. It's really impressive.
I would agree. That's kind of the same, sending a follow-up thank you, and then that's usually when they come back with some information of when they're kind of finishing up interviews and when you should expect to hear something. I think we have time. Amanda, how are we doing on time? One more question?
One or two more questions I think we can squeeze in.
Fit in. Okay, perfect. This is a really quick one real quick. I think I was next on the line. This is Gabby. Any advice for working in a practice setting in which you did not do a level 2 field work? So I kind of, also like Elizabeth kind of was talking about, trying to find a field work site where, you want to pursue maybe a job. So that's kind of what I did with both of my field works. They were both very, they didn't have job openings right away, so I looked into other pediatric settings and am very happy with where I'm at. I did an adult and a pediatric rotation for both of my field works, and so I kind of got the best of both, so I really liked doing an adult and pediatric, and then I think if you kind of do that, then you're kind of set to kind of start out anywhere for a job.
This is Elizabeth. I'm going to try and answer a lot of questions in one fell swoop. So I got several questions about finding a job as a new graduate, either what to highlight on your resume, how to spin being a new graduate as being an asset, how to make your resume stand out even if you don't have work experience. I was very, I think the best thing you can do, because all OT students have field work, so you do have experience and you are bringing something to the table. If you did any special fieldwork projects, if you sought out, any further specialty training, those are great things to highlight. In my experience, what employers have told me has stood out about my resume as a new graduate was how involved I was in AOTA activities. So as a student, I attended Hill Day. I organized a couple events at my school. I took on a lot of leadership opportunities as a student, and that stood out to a lot of employers. They really liked that because it demonstrated my passion for the profession. So if you're still a student, I would encourage you to seek out opportunities like that, because they do help build your leadership capacity and they make you really appealing to future employers. Your skills, if you are coming straight out of, if you're coming like I was to OT from a different career, you can highlight transferable skills. I owned my own business and I worked in several different industries, so I had work experience, and I highlighted my skills from that experience as well in my resume because I thought that made me particularly valuable as a new graduate. And that also stood out. So think about what are your unique skills qualities, even if it's from your non-OT life, or how are you demonstrating your passion for the profession, and how can you convey that in your resume? That, I think, is what makes a resume stand out.
Oh.
So I think that might have been the last question. I think it's time for us to wrap up. I want to thank you all. I'm so sorry we didn't get to all of your questions. There are so many good questions here. But you do have all of our contact information on the final slide, and the PowerPoint has been posted. So you can download that PowerPoint directly from your screen right now. And if you have any questions, feel free to contact any of us. But thank you so much for listening in today.